Before starting the video, if you like the stories, like the videos and subscribe to the channel so that more will come. I'm waiting for your comments and ideas for each episode. Nightmare and Fear. Hello, I'm Knight. Today, I'm going to talk about a terrifying walk I took in the forest with a group of friends. I will never forget what happened during this walk. We were not alone in the darkness of the night, but we knew that something else was in the forest besides us. We decided to take a walk in an old forest outside of town with my friends. Everyone was a bit uneasy because this forest was said to be the center of many horror stories. However, we always laughed them off whenever we heard those stories. As night fell, we began our walk. At first, our laughter and giggles echoed in the darkness of the forest. As we progressed, the darkness within the forest seemed to close in on us a little more. I felt a thrill in my heart, but it was mixed with anxiety. As the shadows among the trees grew, the temperature suddenly dropped. A silence enveloped us. As my eyes drifted into the dark of the forest, I heard a strange sound, like a branch breaking. I turned to my friends. "Did you hear that?" But they all laughed it off. "Don't worry, it's just the wind," they said. But I started to feel that something was off. In that moment, I felt lost in the depths of the forest. With the coldness of the air, the darkness began to intensify. Our conversation suddenly ceased, and only the rustling of the trees remained. We continued walking, but as we ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds began to increase. For a moment, I felt a shiver in my arms. It was as if someone was watching me. After walking a little further, I heard a scream. Everyone immediately stopped, and we strained our eyes to understand what was happening. My heart was racing. This must be a joke, I thought, but the fear inside me was growing. At that moment, we heard a rustling. I saw movement among the trees. I could see the panic on my friends' faces, and I realized how real the fear was. Just then, one of our friends separated from the group to look for something. "Come back here," we shouted, but our voices got lost in the depths of the forest. "Come on, we have to find him," I said, but the others looked scared. My courage wasn't enough to convince them. I decided to follow the missing friend. As I stepped into the darkness of the forest, I felt my fear deepen. With every step, I had the feeling that something was watching me from behind. For a moment, I had to confront my own fear. As I progressed, the darkness of the forest became even denser. The shadows of the trees seemed to move like ghosts. Suddenly, I saw a shadow among the trees. As I opened my eyes, a figure appeared in the darkness. At that moment, the fear within me intensified. My heart started racing as the shadow rapidly materialized beside me. "Where are you, friend?" I shouted, but my voice echoed back. I immediately turned around, but was met only with darkness. I felt lost in a breath. The depths of the forest seemed ready to swallow me. I finally found my missing friend, but the thing beside him was an indescribable source of terror. A long, thin creature was staring at him without moving. My friend's eyes were filled with fear as he whispered, "Don't leave me." The creature's eyes shone with a deep darkness and stood there. It wasn't moving, just watching. Time seemed to stand still. The fear inside me turned into real horror. The creature next to my friend appeared lost, but the darkness within it made it seem like a part of the shadows. When that creature suddenly lunged forward, my friend screamed and began to run. I immediately ran after him, my heart racing. The darkness within the forest intensified. The trees seemed to be collapsing over us. "Hurry!" I shouted, but with every step, those terrifying sounds echoed behind me. The growls coming from among the trees felt like the presence of watching eyes. As we were exiting the forest, I constantly turned back, afraid to see that terrifying creature. My heart was racing, but we had to find our escape route. Finally, when we reached the exit of the forest, we were out of breath. Our eyes were still searching for those dark shadows. Was that thing really in the forest, or had it only existed in our imagination? We looked at each other in fear, knowing we would never forget what we experienced. At that moment, it became a memory etched in my mind that I could never forget. I felt lost in the darkness of the forest throughout the night. My friend's fear heightened my own. That night's walk was not just an adventure, but a fight for survival. That night's walk made me realize how real fear could be. The darkness of that forest revealed our deepest fears. Even years later, I couldn't forget the sounds I heard and those eyes I saw in the forest. What we experienced that night taught me that fear existed not only outside but also within me. Fear was not just an emotion. It was also a test of courage and what it meant to survive. That night was not just a walk, but an inner journey. If you liked Story 1 and I'm waiting for your reactions in the comments section, continue watching the video. For years, I had followed the traces of a long-forgotten legend. A legend about an abandoned mansion deep within a foggy forest on the outskirts of town. According to lore, this mansion had witnessed tragic events and had become a cursed place where tormented souls were trapped. The silent call merging with the darkness of the night drew me toward the unknown. I gathered my courage and set out for that cursed place. Winding paths led me through trees shrouded in mist, and as I advanced, the howling wind and rustling leaves stirred both excitement and apprehension. Finally, I reached the mansion with its worn door slightly ajar. The walls were adorned with mysterious ancient symbols and inscriptions, as if torn from the dusty pages of history. As I stepped into the mansion, a cold draft brushed my face. Moving along narrow corridors filled with dusty antique furniture and dim light seeping through broken windows, I suddenly noticed a faint image on a wall. In an antique mirror, a ghostly silhouette appeared. Was it real or merely my imagination? Whispers echoed off the walls. In that moment, I realized that the secrets of this house belonged not only to the past but also to the silent screams of death. While exploring the labyrinthine rooms of the mansion, I discovered an old diary left on a worn wooden table. It belonged to the former owner, and its pages recounted the horrors of a dark ritual, the binding of souls, and the emergence of curses. At that moment, the silence of the house was shattered. Doors began slamming shut by themselves, and distant, sorrowful, terrifying cries rose up. Perhaps the imprisoned souls had begun to exact their revenge. The clues in the diary led me deeper into the mansion, down dark corridors. In that instant, the house seemed to come alive. Windows slammed shut suddenly, rooms darkened, and I felt as if a pair of eyes were watching me from every corner. Chilled breaths, echoing footsteps, and indistinct whispers drove my terror to its peak. The horror inside me intertwined with the mansion's dark secrets. Time seemed to slow as I advanced toward the heart of the mansion, where I discovered a cursed object, a key element of the ritual described in the diary. Torn between fear and hesitation, I approached the room where it lay. Summoning every ounce of courage, I shattered the object. In that instant, the dark forces within the mansion roared in fury. Doors burst open, spirits were unleashed, and the mansion's walls began to crack and crumble. I made what might have been the most harrowing escape of my life. When I finally emerged outside, gasping for breath as I looked back at the collapsing mansion, I could hardly comprehend what I had witnessed. That mansion, leaving behind its lingering curse and sorrowful history, had indelibly marked my soul with unforgettable memories. This experience was not merely an escape, it was a lesson in confronting inner darkness, in understanding the fragility of life and the true meaning of courage. From that day forward, I began to believe that even in darkness I could hear faint, whispering voices. Now, I understood what these silent screams meant to convey. If you liked Story 2 and I'm waiting for your reactions in the comments section, continue watching the video. Some places are not meant to be found. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. This is the story of a forgotten house, a nameless shadow, and a night that should never have happened. My friends and I decided to explore an old forest just outside the town. Everyone felt a bit uneasy because the forest had been the setting for many horror stories. But whenever we heard those tales, we always laughed them off. As the sun disappeared and darkness settled, we began our walk. At first, our laughter echoed through the trees, breaking the eerie silence. But as we ventured deeper, the darkness of the forest seemed to press against us. A strange excitement filled my chest, but beneath it was a growing sense of unease. As the shadows stretched and the trees grew taller around us, the temperature suddenly dropped. A heavy silence fell between us. While scanning the darkness, I heard a sound, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping underfoot. I turned to my friends. "Did you hear that?" I asked. But they just laughed. "Don't be scared. It's just the wind," one of them said. Yet, deep inside, I felt something was terribly wrong. The darkness seemed thicker now, pressing in from all directions. Our conversation faded away, leaving only the whispering wind and rustling leaves. We continued walking, but as we went deeper, the noises became more frequent. The sound of rustling leaves, faint footsteps, and distant whispers seemed to echo all around us. A shiver ran down my spine. Then, out of nowhere, a scream cut through the silence. We froze. My heart pounded against my ribs as my eyes darted through the darkness, searching for the source of the sound. "This has to be a joke," I thought, trying to convince myself. But the look of pure fear on my friends' faces told me otherwise. Suddenly, we heard movement again. Something was shifting in the trees nearby. The fear in my friends' eyes confirmed it. We were not alone. One of our friends suddenly stepped away from the group, claiming to have seen something. "Come back here," we called after him, but our voices disappeared into the depths of the forest. "We have to find him," I urged, but the others hesitated. Fear had taken hold of them. Despite my own terror, I made a decision. I had to follow him. With every step, the darkness around me grew heavier, and an unshakable feeling of being watched tightened around my chest. The further I walked, the denser the mist became. The trees seemed distorted, their branches stretching unnaturally. Then I saw it, something standing between the trees. My breath hitched in my throat as the figure slowly emerged from the fog. My missing friend was nowhere to be seen. "Where are you?" I called out, but only my own voice echoed back at me. The silence was suffocating. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate breath. It wasn't mine. I turned around instantly. Nothing. Just endless darkness. Then my missing friend appeared, stumbling out from the darkness. But he wasn't alone. A towering, inhuman figure loomed just behind him, its elongated limbs unmoving, its face a featureless void. My friend's eyes were wide with terror. "Don't leave me," he whispered, his voice shaking. The thing behind him didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. Its hollow, empty gaze bore into us. Time seemed to stop. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The air grew colder. The thing remained motionless, but I felt as if it was reaching out, dragging us into the darkness. Without warning, the creature moved. Not a step, not a lunge. Just a shift in its presence, like it had already closed the distance between us in an instant. My friend screamed, breaking the paralyzing grip of fear, and bolted. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest twisted around me, the trees seeming to lean closer, branches clawing at my skin. The sounds behind me, the rustling, the whispering, The heavy breathing grew louder. "Run faster!" I shouted, but my own voice felt distant. The thing was behind us. It wasn't running, but it was keeping up. The very air felt wrong, thick and heavy, as if time itself had started warping. At last, we saw it, the edge of the forest. A faint glow of streetlights beyond the trees. Salvation. We threw ourselves forward, breaking through the suffocating mist and stumbling onto the pavement. The cold night air hit my face like a slap. I turned back. The forest was still, empty, silent. Had it really happened? Or had the forest simply swallowed the nightmare whole, hiding it in the mist once again? We looked at each other, our faces pale, our breaths still uneven. None of us spoke. We didn't have to. We all knew the truth. That thing, whatever it was, it had let us go. But not because we had escaped. Because it wanted us to leave. To tell others. To make sure the legend lived on. That night changed everything. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper. A warning. The darkness of that forest wasn't natural. It wasn't just shadows and trees. It was alive. It was waiting. And now, even after all these years, when the night is quiet and the mist rolls in, I still feel its eyes watching me. If you like the story, do not forget to indicate in the comments what kind of videos, topics, and content examples there are. Subscribe and like my videos so that more will come.